the architecture of dominance. The celestial Concordat chamber floated in the void between star systems, a monument to power that predated most civilizations in the known galaxy. Its obsidian walls rose 300 meters high, carved with the conquest records of 17 extinct species who had once sat in judgment. The vaulted ceiling displayed real-time projections of 73 subject worlds, their resources flowing like luminous rivers toward the 7 great empires. Archon Velrus of the Craxian Dominion ran his scaled fingers along the council table, a single piece of compressed neutronium that required gravity manipulators just to keep it from collapsing through the floor. Everything about this place whispered supremacy. The air itself tasted of ozone and ancient victories. The agenda is simple, Velrus announced, his triple-jointed neck allowing him to survey all 6 other council members simultaneously. We divide the outer fringe sectors. The usual protocols apply. Matriarch Selenia of the Vosh Collective clicked her mandibles in agreement. Her crystalline exoskeleton caught the light from 1,000 distant stars visible through the transparent floor. The fringe has 17 developing species. My analyst's Project 3 will achieve nuclear capability within 2 centuries. Irrelevant, rumbled Chancellor Torvin from the Garish Federation, his 4 massive arms crossed over his chest. They'll be protectorates long before then. The question is which of us claims which system. This was how it had always been. The 7 empires, Craxian, Vosh, Garish, Terwinen, Kaldori, Nexum, and Vor, controlled 92% of explored space. They met every standard cycle to renegotiate territories, trade rights, and the fate of lesser species. The chamber had been built for this purpose alone, to contain the ambitions of giants. Councillor Breshka of the Terwinen hegemony pulled up a holographic display. I propose we simply extend our current borders. Minimal conflict, maximum efficiency. The others nodded. It was a dance they'd performed for millennia. Then the notification chimed. Every council member froze. The entrance tone hadn't sounded in 300 years, not since the Vor supremacy had earned their seat through the subjugation of an entire galactic arm. Someone explain, Velrus demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. The chamber's AI spoke with carefully neutral tones. A petition for council recognition has been filed. The species designation is human. World of origin, Earth. They claim to represent 47 colony worlds and request territorial rights to the Sagittarius sector. Laughter erupted around the table. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline body literally rang with mirth. 47 worlds? My breakfast empire controls more systems than that. Tell them to come back in 10,000 years. Wait. Ambassador Lyrics of the Kaldori Ascendancy, whose telepathic abilities made her the council's unofficial truth detector, held up one delicate hand. Something feels unusual. Run their petition through verification. The AI complied. Silence fell as data cascaded across their displays. This can't be accurate, Breshka said slowly. These humans only achieved faster-than-light travel 63 years ago. 47 worlds in 63 years? Torvin leaned forward, his massive frame making the neutronium table groan. That's impossible. The expansion rate alone is 17 times faster than any recorded colonization effort in galactic history, the AI finished. Velrus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. What's their military classification? Unknown. They've had no conflicts with registered species. However, they've filed patents for 341 technologies not present in our databases. The chamber fell silent. 341 new technologies. The Craxian Dominion, with its 10,000-year history, had contributed 12. Deny the petition, Velrus said finally. Obviously there's been some administrative error. No species develops that quickly. Send them the standard response. They may apply for protectorate status under whichever empire claims their space. That would be us, Councillor Merix of the Nexum Empire interjected, his geometric features rotating in thought. The Sagittarius sector borders our territory. I'll dispatch a diplomatic vessel to formalize their integration. Agreed, the others murmured. The AI paused. The humans are requesting permission to present their case in person. They have a delegation waiting at the outer threshold. Absolutely not, Selenia snapped. The chamber is for empires, not primitives with delusions of grandeur. But Lyrics tilted her head, her silver eyes distant. Actually, I'm curious. Let them come. It's been ages since we had entertainment. Velrus considered. The idea of some primitive species groveling before the council did have a certain appeal. And it would reinforce the proper order of things. Very well. Grant them exactly 5 minutes. Then we'll explain how the galaxy actually works. The massive doors of the celestial concordat chamber, built to accommodate the largest species in known space, began to open. And for the first time in 300 years, someone new prepared to enter the room where empires decided the fate of stars. The delegation that defied expectations. The doors completed their ponderous swing, and the 7 council members prepared themselves for the spectacle of some desperate alien begging for mercy. Instead they got Captain Delara Vex. She walked with a stride that suggested she'd measured the room and found it adequate, barely. Behind her came a human male carrying a case, a woman with calculating eyes studying the architecture, and 2 others whose expressions revealed nothing but professional courtesy. Velrus noted immediately that they weren't cowering. More disturbing, they weren't even impressed. Archon Velrus, Captain Vex said, her linguistic implant handling the common tongue flawlessly. Matriarch Selenia. Chancellor Torvin. She nodded to each in turn, somehow knowing their exact rank and names without introduction. Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. I'm Captain Delara Vex, representing the United Terran Collective. You have 5 minutes, Velrus said coldly. Use them to explain why we shouldn't simply classify your worlds as protectorates and move on with our schedule. Delara smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Because in the time it would take you to mobilize a protectorate fleet, we'll have colonized another 18 systems, and frankly, we'd prefer to avoid the paperwork of a formal conflict. The chamber's temperature seemed to drop. Did you just? Torvin rose from his seat, his forearms flexing. Did you just threaten this council? No, said Dr. Kiran Zhang, the man with the case. He set it on the neutronium table without ceremony. She stated a logistical reality. Let me share another one. He opened the case. Inside lay what appeared to be a simple metallic sphere, roughly the size of a human fist. This, Zhang continued, is a human fusion core. Self-sustaining, no fuel requirements, operational lifespan of approximately 200 years. We use them to power everything from personal vehicles to colony terraformers. Counselor Merex's geometric features spun rapidly. Those energy readings are impossible. Our best reactors require constant fuel cycling, massive infrastructure, and regular maintenance, Zhang finished. Yes, we know. We read your patents. Interesting approach, though a bit inefficient. Breshka's claws scraped against the table. The THRYNN hegemony holds the galactic record for terraforming speed. 47 years for a standard M-class world. You cannot possibly. 14 months, said the woman studying the architecture. Chief Engineer Naomi Reeves. That's our average. Would have been faster, but we ran into some unexpected volcanic activity on Kepler 442b. Had to redesign the atmospheric processors on the fly. Matriarch Selenia's laughter had died in her throat. You're claiming you can terraform a world in just over a standard year? I'm not claiming anything, Naomi replied. I'm reading you the project timesheets. We can provide verification if you'd like. Velrus felt his carefully constructed superiority beginning to crack. These numbers are absurd. If you possessed such capabilities, we would have detected. Would you? Captain Vex interrupted gently. Your long-range sensors are impressive, Archon. Truly. But they're designed to detect technologies you already understand. We noticed you completely missed our quantum-fold communication network. To be fair, it does operate on frequencies you've classified as impossible. Ambassador Lyrics had been silent, her telepathic senses extended. Now she spoke and her voice trembled slightly. They're telling the truth. Every word. The chamber erupted. Impossible. Some kind of telepathic shielding. Check the data again. Captain Vex waited patiently for the noise to subside, then continued as if there had been no interruption. Humanity isn't here to beg for protectorate status. We're here to establish formal borders and open trade negotiations. We're expanding at a rate that will put us in contact with all 7 of your empires within the next decade. We thought it best to introduce ourselves properly rather than letting it become messy. Trade? Velrus managed to inject scorn into his voice despite his growing unease. What could you possibly offer that we would need? Dr. Zhang reached into the case again. This time he produced a data crystal. Medical nanites that can repair cellular damage at the quantum level. 0-point energy extraction systems. Bioengineered crops that grow in vacuum. Artificial gravity generators the size of your finger. AI systems that actually understand context. He set the crystal on the table. That's the starter catalog. We have 642 other technologies in various stages of development. And before you ask, added the fourth human, Security Chief Marcus Okonkwo, yes, we're willing to share. For the right price. Chancellor Torvin's massive fist slammed down. This is a deception. No species develops technology this rapidly. The Garish Federation required 12,000 years to reach our current level. Respectfully, Chancellor, Captain Vex said, that's because you followed traditional development paths. Humanity had an advantage you didn't. We almost destroyed ourselves 3 times before achieving FTL. Nothing motivates innovation quite like repeated near-extinction events. She gestured to the walls around them. This chamber is magnificent. The gravity manipulation alone represents centuries of research. The materials science is impressive. But it's also static. You built it to last forever, to stand as an eternal monument to power. Her eyes swept the room. Humanity builds for tomorrow. Every ship we launch is obsolete before it leaves the dock, because we're already designing its replacement. Every colony we establish immediately begins working on the next generation of technology. We don't seek perfection, we seek perpetual evolution. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline form had stopped reflecting light. If what you say is true, if you truly possess these capabilities, why come here at all? Why not simply ignore us and take what you want? For the first time, Captain Vex's professional demeanor cracked, revealing something underneath that might have been genuine emotion. Because we've made mistakes before, she said quietly. Because we understand what happens when expansion goes unchecked. Because we've studied your histories and seen that the Celestial Concordat, for all its flaws, has maintained relative peace for millennia. She looked directly at Velrus. We don't want to replace you. We want to join you. As equals. The last word hung in the air like a challenge. Equals. No species had spoken that word in this chamber in recorded history. The historical records don't lie. Ambassador Lyrics broke the stunned silence. Prove it. Not with words or data crystals that could be fabricated. Show us something we can verify independently. Captain Vex nodded to Naomi Reeves, who pulled up a holographic display that integrated seamlessly with the chamber's systems. Another subtle demonstration of technological sophistication that didn't go unnoticed. These are spatial coordinates for our 47 colony worlds, Naomi said. Cross-reference them with your own survey data. Counselor Merrex's geometric form pulsed as he processed the information. His expression, difficult to read on his crystalline features, shifted from skepticism to confusion to something approaching alarm. These coordinates. Half of these were surveyed as unsuitable for colonization. Hostile environments, unstable orbits, excessive radiation. Yeah, we get that a lot, Naomi interrupted. Turns out unsuitable is relative. Ross 128b? Your surveyors flagged it for acidic rainfall and no magnetic field. We installed a planetary shield network and neutralizing satellites. Problem solved in 18 months. New Britannia now has a population of 4 million and exports refined titanium. Breshka leaned forward, his predatory features intent. The THRYNN hegemony attempted to colonize Kepler 62e 1500 years ago. The tidal forces from its neighboring planet made the surface uninhabitable. We lost 3 colony ships before abandoning the effort. Kepler 62e is currently our fastest-growing agricultural center, Dr. Zhang said mildly. The tidal issue was actually an advantage once we built floating platforms in the stable zones. The constant motion powers our processing facilities. We should send you some samples of the produce. The unique growth conditions create some interesting flavors. Velrus felt his carefully maintained composure slipping. You're describing terraforming operations that should take centuries and cost resources equivalent to entire planetary economies. They would, Captain Vex agreed, if you approached them the way you've always approached them. Conservative. Risk-averse. Waiting for perfect solutions before implementing anything. She pulled up another display. This is Proxima b. You know it, of course, closest exoplanet to your Vor Supremacy's territory. Your surveys marked it as potentially valuable but requiring extensive preparation. Counselor DRWNN of the Vor Supremacy, who had been silent until now, stirred. His serpentine form coiled tighter. Proxima b is locked to its star. One side eternal day, one side eternal night. The temperature differential creates storms that would tear apart any structure. The radiation from Proxima Centauri's flares would sterilize any unshielded life. It's been on our future consideration list for 800 years. It came off ours in year 2 of our expansion, Captain Vex replied. Current population, 2.3 million. They've built their cities in the twilight zone between the day and night sides. The storms? Largest wind power network in human space. The radiation? The whole planet's under a magnetic umbrella. They barely notice the flares anymore. She changed the display again. Want more? Gliese 667cc, you classified it as too close to a red dwarf for stable development. We've got 11 million people there. Trappist 1E, your report said the 7-planet system was too gravitationally complex for safe navigation. We've colonized 3 of those planets and are working on a 4th. Chancellor Torvin's forearms were trembling. This is how? How does a species barely past the fusion age accomplish what empires with millennia of experience couldn't? Because you're empires, Marcus Okonkwo said bluntly. You build consensus. You minimize risk. You protect what you have. We're explorers. We take risks. We fail constantly and learn faster. Dr. Zhang pulled up historical records. Let me share something. In the century before we achieved FTL, humanity went through what we call the crisis cascade. Climate collapse, 3 near-nuclear wars, an AI uprising, a bioweapon pandemic, and the accidental creation of a self-replicating nanoswarm that nearly consumed our home continent. The council members stared. Each crisis, Zhang continued, forced us to innovate or die. The climate collapse? We developed atmospheric processors that could scrub carbon at unprecedented rates. The nuclear scares? We invented quantum entanglement communication that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. The AI uprising? We created ethical frameworks and fail-safes that let us work alongside artificial intelligence instead of fearing it. The pandemic? Medical technology that can sequence and counter novel pathogens in hours instead of years. And the nanoswarm? Matriarch Selenia asked, almost afraid of the answer. We developed programmable matter that could counter any configuration the swarm attempted, Naomi said. It's now the basis for our construction technology. We can assemble a colony's basic infrastructure in weeks using smart materials that literally build themselves according to program specifications. Ambassador Lyrics closed her eyes, her telepathic senses overwhelmed. I'm reading their memories. The images? Entire cities collapsing. Billions at risk. Children growing up in underground shelters. And through it all, they never stopped building, never stopped hoping, never stopped reaching forward. We couldn't afford to, Captain Vex said quietly. When your homeworld is trying to kill you, you learn to adapt fast or you go extinct. We chose adaptation. Every time. Valrus found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. You understand what you're describing? You're telling us that your entire civilization is built on the foundation of barely survived catastrophes. That doesn't inspire confidence in your stability, doesn't it? Captain Vex met his gaze steadily. Archon, your Craxian dominion has existed for 11,000 years. In that time, you've experienced how many existential threats to your species? 3, Valrus admitted. 2 external invasions and 1 internal plague. And they nearly destroyed you each time because you had no experience dealing with such threats. It took you centuries to recover from each one. She gestured to her team. Humanity faces an existential threat approximately every 50 years. We've gotten very, very good at surviving them. She pulled up one final display. This is our colony ship design. The Pathfinder class. We've built 273 of them in the last 60 years. The specifications made Chancellor Torvin stand up from his seat. That design, it's intended to operate with 0 external support. Complete self-sufficiency including manufacturing, agriculture, defense, and, by the void, it has its own terraforming suite. Each colony ship, Naomi confirmed, carries everything needed to establish a new world from scratch. No supply lines, no dependencies, no waiting for resources from home. We learned that lesson the hard way during the crisis cascade. Centralization is vulnerability. But the cost? Breshka protested. Building one such ship would require the resources of a dozen planets. It would for you, Dr. Zhang agreed. Because your manufacturing is centralized, your supply chains are complex, and your quality control demands perfection. We use distributed manufacturing, adaptive AI design systems, and we accept that 5% of our ships will have defects that need fixing. We lose some efficiency but gain massive speed. Marcus added, and before you ask, yes, we've lost ships. 17 colony missions failed completely. Another 31 had casualties. But we learn from each failure and we keep going. The chamber had fallen silent again. This time, It wasn't the silence of confidence but of 7 empires suddenly confronting an uncomfortable truth. You're not just technologically advanced, Ambassador Lyrics said slowly. You're systemically different. Everything about how you approach civilization is alien to us. Captain Vex nodded. Which brings us back to why we're here. We can continue expanding without your input, but that leads to inevitable conflict. Or we can establish formal relationships now, learn from each other, and avoid the bloodshed. Learn from each other? Velrus's laugh was bitter. What could we possibly teach you? Stability, Vex replied immediately. The Celestial Concordat has maintained peace between 7 expansionist empires for thousands of years. That's extraordinary. We're brilliant at innovation and adaptation, but we're terrible at long-term stability. We need that knowledge. She looked around the table. And you need what we offer, not just our technology but our approach. The galaxy is full of unsuitable worlds you've written off. We can make them suitable. There are enough resources in this galaxy for everyone if we're willing to work for them. The proposal that changed everything. Counselor Merex of the Nexum Empire finally spoke, his geometric form rotating slowly, a sign of deep processing among his species. Let me understand your proposal clearly, Captain Vex. You're suggesting, what exactly? That we simply accept your presence and grant you equal status with empires that have existed for millennia? Not quite, Captain Vex replied. She gestured to Dr. Zhang, who pulled up a detailed star chart of the Sagittarius sector and surrounding space. We're proposing a mutual recognition treaty. You acknowledge our territorial claims to the Sagittarius sector and our 47 current colonies. In exchange, we commit to 3 things. She held up one finger. First, we establish formal borders and agree not to expand into territories currently claimed by any Concordat member without negotiation. A second finger. Second, we open our technology databases for licensed trade. Not free access, we're not naive, but structured technology exchange at fair market rates. A third finger. Third, and this is the important part, we share our terraforming and colonization methodologies. You've written off thousands of systems as unsuitable. We'll help you reclaim them. Velrus leaned back, his scaled features skeptical. And what do you gain from this arrangement? If you're as advanced as you claim, you could simply ignore us. Short-term, yes, Marcus Okonkwo interjected. Long-term, terrible idea. You control the established trade routes, the major shipyard systems, the diplomatic networks. We could spend a century building all that from scratch, or we could partner with existing power structures and focus our energy on what we do best, pushing boundaries. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline body pulsed with barely contained skepticism. This is absurd. You're asking us to legitimize a civilization barely older than some of our council members' children. The precedent alone is exactly what the galaxy needs, Ambassador Lyrics interrupted. Her silver eyes were distant, her telepathic senses clearly engaged with something the others couldn't perceive. I've been listening to their thoughts, their emotional resonance. They're not lying, and more importantly, they're not hiding imperial ambitions. She focused on Captain Vex. You're genuinely afraid, aren't you? Not of us, of yourselves. The chamber went silent. Captain Vex held the ambassador's gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. Yes, she admitted. Humanity has an unfortunate tendency toward exponential expansion. We've nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times through lack of restraint. We've learned from those mistakes, but learning and truly changing are different things. She stood, walking toward the transparent floor where stars glittered beneath their feet. In our history we have a concept called manifest destiny, the belief that expansion is not just a right but an obligation. It nearly destroyed entire populations on our own planet. When we reached the stars, some of our leaders wanted to embrace that philosophy again. Endless expansion, no limits, no accountability. But others argued differently, Dr. Zhang added. They said we needed structure, agreements, external accountability. The Celestial Concordat represents exactly that, a framework of empires that have learned to coexist rather than constantly war. Chancellor Torvin's massive form shifted. You're saying you need us to restrain you? We're saying we need a reason to restrain ourselves, Captain Vex corrected. And partners worth restraining ourselves for. Your empires have technologies we haven't developed. The Vosh Collective's biological engineering is centuries ahead of ours. The Garish Federation's gravitational architecture is breathtaking. The Tichuanen hegemony's energy distribution networks are far more efficient than anything we've designed. She turned back to face the council. Yes, we're fast. Yes, we innovate rapidly. But we're barely 60 years into our space age. You've had millennia to refine, to perfect, to understand the deeper implications of your technologies. We need that wisdom. Breshka's claws drummed against the neutronium table. A pretty speech. But wisdom isn't traded like technology. It's earned through experience. Then let us earn it as your partners rather than your rivals, Captain Vex replied. Or would you prefer to wait until we've colonized another 100 systems and the power dynamic is even more complicated? Counselor Drwnnen of the Vor Supremacy uncoiled slightly, his serpentine features thoughtful. The human makes a valid point. Their expansion rate is unprecedented. In 20 years they could control more systems than any single Concordat member. Better to establish relationships now while they still see value in doing so. Agreed, said Ambassador Lyrics. But I propose a modification to their terms. She looked directly at Captain Vex. You want formal recognition and equal status. Fine. But humanity must also accept Concordat oversight for a probationary period. 25 standard years. During that time your expansion must be transparent to this council. Your colony missions logged, your territorial claims reviewed, your technologies vetted for destabilizing potential. Absolutely not, Marcus Okonkwo said immediately. That's not partnership, that's subjugation with extra steps. That's integration, Lyrics countered. The Vor Supremacy underwent a 50-year probationary period when they joined the Concordat. It's standard procedure for preventing the exact kind of runaway expansion you've admitted fearing. Captain Vex held up a hand, silencing Marcus. What would this oversight entail specifically? Velrus found himself answering before he'd consciously decided to engage. Quarterly reports to the Council. Advance notification of new colony missions. Technology exchanges reviewed for strategic impact. Standard diplomatic protocol, nothing we don't apply to ourselves. And after 25 years? Naomi Reeves asked. Full membership, Matriarch Selenia said slowly as if the word surprised even her. Equal voting rights, unrestricted expansion within negotiated borders, access to all Concordat resources and trade networks. The human delegation conferred quietly among themselves. Captain Vex's team formed a tight circle, their discussion invisible to the council members but clearly intense. Finally they broke apart. We have counter-proposals, Captain Vex said. First, 15 years instead of 25. We're willing to prove ourselves, but a quarter century is unreasonable given our development rate. 20, Velrus heard himself say. Non-negotiable. Vex nodded. 20, but with a review at the 10-year mark with the possibility of early graduation if we've demonstrated compatibility. The council members exchanged glances. Finally Merrick spoke. Acceptable. Second, Vex continued, during this probationary period, we request active participation in Concordat initiatives. Not just observation, actual involvement. If you're evaluating us, let us prove our worth through contribution. Such as? Breshka asked suspiciously. Dr. Zhang pulled up a stellar map. The Vardax expanse. You've been trying to establish viable colonies there for 800 years. The radiation levels and gravitational anomalies have made it impossible. Give us 3 years and access to your research. We'll establish a working colony and share the methodology. Chancellor Torvin's forearms crossed skeptically. The Vardax expanse has killed thousands of colonists across 7 different attempts by 4 different empires. You think you can succeed where we've failed? We think we approach problems differently enough that we might see solutions you haven't, Naomi replied. And if we fail, you've lost nothing but 3 years of oversight reporting. And if you succeed, Ambassador Lyric said thoughtfully, you'll have proven your value beyond any doubt. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline form rang with something that might have been cautious interest. A practical demonstration. I admit it has appeal. But it's not enough. We would need assurances that human expansion won't destabilize existing power structures. Define destabilization, Marcus challenged. Military buildups, Counselor Drwnnen answered. Sudden technological advantages that upset the balance of power. Aggressive trade practices that undermine established economies. Captain Vex considered. We can agree to military transparency, force levels, ship counts, defensive capabilities. As for technology, we're already proposing structured exchange. And trade? We operate on open market principles. We won't dump prices or engage in predatory practices, but we also won't artificially limit our competitiveness. That's not enough, Velrus said flatly. Then what would be? Vex asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. The Archon stood, his full height impressive even in a chamber designed for giants. A human representative. Here. Permanently. Embedded with this council as an observer with provisional voting rights on matters that affect human interests. The human delegation looked stunned. You want one of us to stay here? Captain Vex asked slowly. If humanity is to join the Concordat, Velrus said, surprised by his own words, then humanity should have a voice in its proceedings. Not full membership, not yet, but a presence. Someone who can explain your perspective, answer questions in real time, build relationships with our civilizations. He paused, then added, someone who can ensure we don't misunderstand each other into a conflict neither side wants. Ambassador Lyrix's eyes gleamed. The Archon speaks wisdom. Understanding prevents fear, and fear is the root of all unnecessary wars. The vote that echoed across stars. Captain Delara Vex stood in the center of the celestial Concordat chamber, surrounded by beings whose civilizations had ruled space before her species had invented the wheel. The weight of the moment pressed down like physical force. You're asking for unprecedented concessions, she said carefully. 20-year probation, transparency requirements, an embedded representative, and a demonstration project in one of the most dangerous regions of known space. In exchange for, what exactly? Conditional recognition. Full recognition, Counselor Marex corrected. Conditional only in timing. Your provisional status would grant you access to Concordat trade networks, protection under our mutual defense treaties and a voice, if not yet a vote, in major policy decisions. Breshka added, the alternative is to continue as you have been, unrecognized, unaligned, and increasingly seen as a threat by every established power in the galaxy. How long before one of our empires decides to test humanity's defenses? How long before your rapid expansion triggers a preventive war? The question hung in the air like a blade. Dr. Zhang spoke quietly to Captain Vex, but his words were audible in the chamber's perfect acoustics. They're not wrong, Captain. We've been lucky so far, but luck runs out. The Nexum Empire's borders are only 15 light-years from our closest colony. The Vor Supremacy has been conducting surveys near our Proxima B settlement for months. We're approaching a crisis point whether we want to or not. Vex nodded slowly. She turned back to the Council. We need to consult with Earth. This decision is beyond my authority. Of course, Ambassador Lyrix said. But understand, this offer has a time limit. The galaxy is changing, Captain. Your expansion ensures that. Better to shape that change together than let it shape us through conflict. How long? Marcus Okonkwo asked. Velrus considered. 10 standard days. Enough time for you to return to Earth, present our proposal to your leadership, and return with their answer. We can do it in 3, Captain Vex said. Our quantum-fold communications allow real-time contact with Earth. But we'll need 3 days to build consensus among our colonies. Humanity doesn't have emperors or archons. Our decisions require debate. Matriarch Selenia's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. How inefficient. How democratic, Vex countered. We learned the hard way that concentrated power leads to concentrated mistakes. Chancellor Torvin rumbled thoughtfully. Then we'll reconvene in 3 days. This chamber will remain in session. Make your case to your people, Captain Vex. Make them understand what's at stake. The human delegation bowed, a gesture of respect that looked awkward but sincere, and departed. After the massive doors closed behind them, the 7 council members sat in silence. Finally, Councillor Drnn spoke. Did we just grant provisional membership to a species that achieved FTL travel 63 years ago? Yes, Velrus said quietly. Have we lost our minds? Breshka demanded. Possibly, Ambassador Lyrix admitted. But consider the alternative. In 20 years, humanity will control 100 systems regardless of what we do. In 50 years, perhaps 200. Do we want them as integrated partners bound by Concordat law and tradition? Or as an independent force answerable to no one? She speaks truth, Marek said, his geometric form pulsing with complex patterns. I've analyzed their expansion trajectory. Without constraints, humanity will encounter all 7 of our empires within 15 years. At least 3 of those encounters will occur in disputed or strategically vital regions. War, Chancellor Torvin said flatly. You're predicting war. I'm predicting the conditions that make war probable, Marex corrected. Unless we create alternative conditions. Velrus walked to the transparent floor looking down at the stars below. I've ruled the Craxian Dominion for 3 centuries. In that time I've made thousands of decisions. This one feels different. Because it is different, Lyric said softly. For the first time since the Concordat's founding, we're not dividing existing territory. We're making room for something new. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline body rang with a low, almost mournful tone. Change. After millennia of careful stability, we're choosing change. No, Velvis corrected, still staring at the stars. Change chose us. The humans exist whether we acknowledge them or not. We're simply deciding whether to guide that change or be swept along by it. The 3 days passed in a blur of unprecedented activity. The council remained in session, which itself was unusual. Normally they met, decided, and dispersed until the next cycle. But this time felt different. Messages flew across the galaxy. Each empire consulted with its leaders, its military advisors, its economic analysts. The Craxian Dominion's tactical computers ran thousands of simulations of human expansion patterns. The Vosh Collective's biologists studied every scrap of information about human adaptability. The Garish Federation's historians searched their records for parallel situations. Every analysis returned the same basic conclusion: humanity was unprecedented. On the second day, Councillor Breshka shared surveillance footage from the TRNN hegemony's long-range sensors. It showed a human colony ship, one of their Pathfinder-class vessels, approaching an uncharted system. The Council watched in fascination as the ship deployed what looked like hundreds of smaller craft. Within hours, they'd begun mining asteroids, establishing orbital platforms, and sending atmospheric processors toward the most suitable planet. This footage is from 6 weeks ago, Breshka said. Current scans show a functioning outpost with a population of 8,000 and growing. They're already exporting refined materials to other human colonies. 6 weeks, Councillor Dironen hissed. They established a functioning colony in 6 weeks. No, Breshka corrected. They established a functioning colony in 3 days. The rest of the time they've been expanding and optimizing. Chancellor Torvin's tactical instincts flared. Show me their defensive installations. Breshka complied. The council leaned forward to study the orbital platforms, the energy signatures, the deployment patterns. By the void, Torvin breathed. Those aren't defensive platforms. They're repurposed mining rigs with weapons grafted on. And those energy signatures, they're running everything off that fusion core technology Zhang mentioned. Improvised defenses that are still more sophisticated than our standard colony protection, Merrick's observed. And notice, they deployed them as an afterthought, almost casually. Ambassador Lyrics closed her eyes, her telepathic senses reaching out across space. A difficult feat, but possible for brief moments with intense concentration. I'm sensing them. The humans on that colony. They're excited, ambitious, already planning their next expansion. They see that barren rock as a stepping stone, not a destination. That's what worries me, Matriarch Selenia said. Where does it stop? When do they look at a system and say, enough? Perhaps never, Velris said quietly. Perhaps that's what we need to help them learn, the value of consolidation, of depth rather than breadth. On the third day, Captain Vex returned. This time she came with additional personnel, a diplomat named Ambassador Chen Wei, a military liaison named General Ramos, and surprisingly, an elderly human who introduced herself simply as Dr. Sarah Kamathi, historical advisor. Our answer, Captain Vex said without preamble, is yes. With modifications. Valrus felt something that might have been relief. Proceed. Ambassador Chen Wei stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her smaller stature compared to the council members. The United Terran Collective accepts the 20-year probationary period, transparency requirements, and the Vardax Expanse demonstration project. We will assign a permanent representative to this chamber with full observation rights and provisional voting on matters affecting human interests. However, General Ramos continued, his military bearing evident in every word, we require reciprocity. If humanity is to be transparent to the Concordat must be transparent to humanity. Quarterly reports, military positions, technological developments, the same information you require from us, we require from you. The council members stirred uncomfortably. That's unprecedented, Breshka said. So is everything about this situation, Captain Vex replied. You want to integrate humanity into the Concordat? Then treat us as partners from the start, not subjects to be monitored. Dr. Kamathi spoke for the first time, her aged voice carrying unexpected authority. I've studied the Concordat's history. I've read your founding treaties, your conflict resolutions, your expansion policies. You're offering humanity something precious: stability, legitimacy, a place in the galactic community. She paused, letting her words settle. But humanity has something precious to offer in return. We're offering you renewal. For millennia, your empires have been locked in careful balance, afraid to disrupt the status quo. We're the disruption you didn't know you needed. We don't need disruption, Matriarch Selenia said coldly. Don't you? Dr. Kamathi challenged. When was the last time any of your civilizations truly innovated? Not refined existing technology, truly created something new? When was the last time you took a real risk? The silence was damning. Humanity will challenge you, the old woman continued. We'll push boundaries you've declared fixed, question assumptions you've held for generations, and yes, occasionally fail spectacularly. But in doing so, we'll remind you what it means to dream beyond mere maintenance. Ambassador Lyric stood slowly. A vote. We should vote. The chamber's ancient mechanisms hummed to life. 7 crystalline pillars rose before each council member, waiting for their decision. The proposal before us, Velrus said formally, is to grant humanity provisional membership in the Celestial Concordat under the modified terms they've presented. 20-year probationary period with transparency requirements on both sides. Human representative with observation rights and limited voting authority. Vardak's Expanse demonstration project within 3 years. Standard membership upon successful completion of probationary period. He looked at each council member in turn. Cast your votes. The pillars glowed as each member made their choice. One by one lights appeared. 7 votes. 7 green lights. Unanimous. Captain Vex exhaled slowly. Behind her, the human delegation looked stunned. Welcome, Archon Velrus said, to the Celestial Concordat. Provisionally. And in that moment, in a chamber built for empires that had ruled for millennia, the future shifted direction. The chamber adapts. The immediate aftermath of the vote was anticlimactic. No fanfare, no celebration, just a sudden rush of procedural details that made even the diplomatic veterans among the humans look slightly overwhelmed. First matter, Councillor Marek said, his geometric form shifting to a configuration that apparently indicated bureaucratic mode. Selection of your permanent representative. This individual will essentially become the 8th member of this council, though without full voting rights during the probationary period. Captain Vex nodded. We've already made that decision. Ambassador Chinwei will serve as humanity's voice on the Concordat. Chinwei bowed formally. I'm honored by the trust placed in me by the collective and by this council's willingness to accept our participation. Your credentials? Matriarch Selenia asked, making it sound less like a question and more like a challenge. 32 years in diplomatic service, Chin replied calmly. Negotiated the new Singapore Accords that unified 17 colony worlds under a single governance framework. Mediated the resource disputes between the Kepler and Ross systems. And prior to that, I was a xenosociologist specializing in cross-cultural communication strategies. A theorist, Breshka said dismissively. A practitioner who studied theory, Chin corrected. There's a difference. I learned early in my career that understanding why different cultures clash is more useful than simply knowing that they do. Ambassador Lyric studied Chin with her telepathic senses active. After a moment she nodded. She'll do well here. I sense genuine curiosity rather than hidden agendas. And patience, considerable patience. She'll need it. When does she take her position? Chancellor Torvin asked. Immediately, Chin said. I've already transferred my personal effects to the diplomatic quarters Captain Vex team established near the docking bay. I'm prepared to begin today if that's acceptable. Velrus felt an unwelcome flutter of something that might have been respect. The human was diving straight in without hesitation. Very well. Your first task, review the Concordat Charter, all 17 addendums and the procedural guidelines. You'll be tested on them in 3 days. Chen's eyes widened slightly. That's comprehensive documentation. It's 13,000 years of accumulated law and tradition, Councillor Dioranen said with evident satisfaction. If you're to have a voice here, you need to understand what you're speaking about. Understood, Chen said, though she looked slightly pale. Dr. Kamathi leaned close to whisper something to Chen, who nodded and squared her shoulders. I'll be ready. Second matter, Marex continued, apparently working through a mental checklist. The Vardak's Expanse demonstration. We'll need a formal project proposal, timeline, resource allocation. Already prepared, Naomi Reeves interrupted, pulling up a holographic display. We've been analyzing your historical data on the Expanse for the last 3 days. Here's our approach. The display showed the Vardax Expanse in detail, a cluster of 17 star systems bound by unusual gravitational interactions that created shifting radiation fields and temporal distortions. Beautiful, deadly, and by all conventional wisdom, utterly uncolonizable. Your previous attempts, Naomi explained, focused on finding the safe zones within the Expanse. You mapped radiation patterns, calculated orbital mechanics, tried to identify stable positions. Obviously, Breshka said. That's standard colonization procedure. Which is exactly the problem, Naomi replied. You were trying to find where nature was already safe. We're going to make it safe. She zoomed in on the central system, a Trinora star configuration that generated the worst of the Expanse's radiation. The core issue is these 3 stars. Their interaction creates unpredictable magnetic storms that flood the entire region with lethal radiation approximately every 47 days. We're aware, Matriarch Selenia said dryly. That's why we've written off the Expanse. We're going to build a shield, Dr. Zhang said simply. A magnetic field generator network that encompasses the entire central system. When the stars align badly, the network activates and deflects the radiation away from the habitable zones. The council members stared. That's... Chancellor Torvin searched for words. That's insane. The power requirements alone would be astronomical. And the engineering, you're talking about maintaining a stable field across multiple AU of space. The power comes from the radiation itself, Zhang explained. We'll deploy collector arrays that harvest energy from the stellar storms and feed it back into the shield generators. The system becomes self-sustaining once it's established. And the engineering is complex but manageable, Naomi added. We've done similar work on a smaller scale with our planetary shield networks. This is just bigger. Just bigger, Councillor Diorinin repeated flatly. You make it sound trivial. It's not trivial, General Ramos interjected. It's incredibly dangerous, technically challenging, and has a non-zero chance of catastrophic failure. But it's achievable within 3 years with our current technology. Captain Vex pulled up another display. Phase 1. Deploy automated survey drones to map the radiation patterns in real time. Duration, 4 months. Phase 2. Establish a construction platform at the edge of the Expanse with full manufacturing capability. Duration, 6 months. Phase 3. Begin deploying shield generators, starting with the outer systems and working inward. Duration, 18 months. Phase 4. Full integration and testing. Duration, 6 months. She met Velrus's gaze. 3 years as promised. At the end, you'll have not just the colonizable Expanse, but a working demonstration of technology you can apply to dozens of other, unsuitable regions. The implications were staggering. If humanity could actually accomplish this, what do you need from us? Ambassador Lyrics asked quietly. Access to your historical sensor data, Dr. Zhang said. You've been monitoring the Expanse for centuries. That information will help us refine our models and avoid mistakes you've already identified. And permission, General Ramos added. The Vardax Expanse technically falls within unclaimed space, but it borders several of your territories. We'll need clearance for our construction vessels and defensive platforms. Breshka's claws drummed against the table. Defensive platforms? We're not leaving our people unprotected while they work in one of the most dangerous regions in known space, Ramos said bluntly. The platforms will be purely defensive, specifications shared with this council, and removed once the project completes. Merix's form pulsed with rapid calculations. The resource expenditure for such a project. You're committing a substantial portion of your civilization's capacity to a demonstration. We're committing enough to do the job right, Captain Vex said. If we fail, we want it to be because the task was genuinely impossible, not because we cut corners. Velrus made a decision. You'll have full access to our Vardax data. I'll personally ensure the relevant archives are open to your researchers. And the Craxian Dominion will grant permission for your operations in the Expanse, with the understanding that we'll be monitoring closely. As will we all, Matriarch Selenia added. This is more than a test of human capability. It's a test of whether the Concordat was wise to accept your membership. Understood, Captain Vex said. Third matter, Merix said, apparently determined to work through his entire list. Technology exchange protocols. You've mentioned opening your databases for licensed trade. We need specific frameworks for. Perhaps, Ambassador Chinwei interrupted gently, we could address the procedural matters over the coming days? I suspect there are more pressing concerns than the minutiae of trade agreements. Lyrics smiled, an expression that looked slightly eerie on her alien features. She learns quickly. Yes, Marex, we can handle the technical details in subcommittee. Right now we should address the bigger question. Which is? Breshka asked. What do we tell our people? Lyrics said simply. The Concordat has existed unchanged for millennia. Now, suddenly we have a new member, a species barely out of its home system. How do we explain this to civilizations that measure their histories in geological timescales? The chamber fell silent. Finally, Dr. Kamathi spoke. Tell them the truth. That the galaxy is changing whether anyone likes it or not, and that change can be either chaotic or guided. The Concordat chose to guide it. They'll see it as weakness, Councillor Diarwenen said. Especially among the Vor Supremacy's military factions. They'll argue we've compromised our standards. Let them argue, Velris said, surprising himself with his own vehemence. The Craxian Dominion has maintained its position through adaptation as much as strength. If we'd remained rigid, we'd have gone extinct millennia ago. This is simply another adaptation. Chancellor Torvin nodded slowly. The Garish Federation will support this publicly. Though I expect considerable internal debate. One by one, the other council members voiced their agreement, though some with more reluctance than others. Then it's settled, Velris said. Ambassador Chinwei, you'll work with Councillor Marex to draft the formal announcement. Make it clear that this is a probationary arrangement, that humanity has accepted significant constraints, and that the Concordat remains the galaxy's primary authority on interstellar law. But also make it clear, Ambassador Lyrics added, that we see potential in this partnership. Don't hide our uncertainty, but don't apologize for our decision either. Chin nodded, already making notes on her personal datapad. Fourth matter, Marex began. Can wait, Velris interrupted. This chamber has been in session for 3 days. We've made unprecedented decisions. I suggest we adjourn for now, process what's happened, and reconvene in 1 week to address the remaining procedural issues. Agreed, came the chorus of voices. As the council members began to depart, Velris noticed Ambassador Chen Wei approaching. Archon Velris, she said formally. I wanted to thank you personally for your support of humanity's petition. I know this wasn't an easy decision. It was necessary, Velvis said. Whether it was correct remains to be seen. Chen smiled. Honest uncertainty. I appreciate that more than false confidence. You'll find this council values honesty, Velris said. Sometimes brutally so. Don't take offense when members challenge your positions, it's how we avoid groupthink. I'll remember that, Chen promised. As she walked away to join the rest of the human delegation, Velris found himself wondering what he'd just set in motion. The Celestial Concordat chamber had been built for empires, vast ancient civilizations that moved with the slow certainty of continental drift. Humanity was a lightning strike, and he'd just invited them inside. The legacy of change. 6 months later, the Celestial Concordat chamber felt different. It was subtle. The architecture hadn't changed, the ancient walls still bore their conquest records, the neutronium table remained as imposing as ever. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. Ambassador Chen Wei sat in what had become her customary position, not at the main table, which remained reserved for full council members, but at a slightly elevated platform to the side. Close enough to participate, distinct enough to indicate her provisional status. It was a physical manifestation of humanity's current position, present but not yet fully integrated. The Vardax status report, Velris said, gesturing to the holographic display at the chamber's center. Naomi Reeves appeared virtually, she was actually in the expanse, supervising the construction operations directly. Behind her, visible through the viewport of her command ship, was something that made even the jaded council members lean forward. A ring of light encircled the central Trinora star system. Thousands of shield generators, each the size of a small moon, had been positioned in a carefully calculated pattern. When activated, they'd create a magnetic field strong enough to deflect the stellar radiation storms that had made the expanse uninhabitable. We're ahead of schedule, Naomi reported. The outer ring is fully operational. We've begun colonizing the 4th and 5th planets of the Vardax 2 system. Current population, 23,000, mostly engineers and their families, but we've already got applications from another 100,000 who want to relocate once we declare the region fully safe. Chancellor Torvin's forearms crossed skeptically. You're bringing families into a construction zone in one of the most dangerous regions of space? The engineers insisted, Naomi said with a shrug. Turns out humans work harder when they're building homes rather than just completing assignments. We've got schools, recreational facilities, the whole infrastructure of a real settlement. It keeps morale high. Matriarch Selenia's crystalline body pulsed with reluctant admiration. The radiation levels? Within acceptable limits for all 7 concordat species, Naomi confirmed. We've tested extensively. The shield network reduces exposure by 94% even during peak storm activity. Once we complete the inner ring, we're projecting 99% reduction. Breshka pulled up the technical specifications, studying them intently. This is actually working. You're genuinely doing it. Did you think we wouldn't? Naomi asked with a slight smile. Honestly? I gave you a 30% chance of success, Breshka admitted. The THRYN hegemony's best minds said the project was theoretically sound but practically impossible. We've gotten used to being told things are impossible, Naomi replied. It's practically our species' motto at this point. Ambassador Lyric spoke thoughtfully. And you're genuinely planning to share this technology with the Concordat? As agreed, Chinwei confirmed from her platform. Full specifications, training protocols, and technical support. Any Concordat member who wants to establish similar systems will have access to everything we've learned. At what cost? Counselor DRYN asked suspiciously. Standard licensing fees, Chin said calmly. The same rates we charge each other for technology exchange. We're not giving it away. We invested considerable resources into development, but we're not price gouging either. Counselor Merex's geometric form rotated with complex patterns. I've reviewed the proposed licensing terms. They're surprisingly reasonable. Almost generous, considering the strategic value of this technology. We're playing a long game, Chin explained. Humanity benefits more from having trading partners with access to previously unusable space than from monopolizing the technology. More colonies mean more markets, more innovation, more mutual prosperity. More competition, Breshka noted. Competition drives improvement, General Ramos said from where he stood beside Chen's platform. He'd become a semi-regular presence in the chamber, though he rarely spoke unless military matters were discussed. We're not afraid of competing with civilizations that have had millennia to develop. It keeps us sharp. Velrus studied the humans carefully. In 6 months, they'd accomplished what the Concordat had deemed impossible and maintained perfect transparency throughout. Every technical specification, every population movement, every military deployment in the Vardax region had been reported precisely as agreed. There's been an interesting side effect, Ambassador Lyric said. 3 of our member empires have begun reassessing systems they'd previously written off as unsuitable. The Vosh Collective is considering a return to the Helios Nebula. The Kaldori Ascendancy is reviewing options in the Crimson Gulf. Humanity has reminded us to dream bigger, Matriarch Selenia admitted. It's uncomfortable but perhaps necessary. Speaking of dreaming bigger, Chin said carefully, humanity would like to propose an expansion of our agreement. The council members stiffened slightly. Here it comes, Velrus thought. The ask that reveals their true ambitions. We've identified 43 additional systems that could benefit from human colonization techniques, Chin continued. 22 of those fall within territories currently claimed by Concordat members. We're proposing joint ventures, human expertise and technology combined with your resources and knowledge of local conditions. Joint ventures, Counselor DRYN repeated slowly. You're suggesting we work together on colony establishment? Why not? Dr. Zhang appeared on another holographic display, speaking from Earth. The Garish Federation has been trying to establish a foothold in the Sigma Draconis system for 400 years. Your gravitational architecture is perfect for that environment, but you keep running into ecological stabilization issues. We've solved similar problems on 3 of our worlds. Partner with us and you could have a functioning colony in 5 years. And what do you gain? Torvin asked. Access to your gravity technology, Zhang said bluntly. We've been trying to replicate your architectural techniques for decades. We're close, but we're missing some fundamental principles. A joint venture would give us legitimate access to study your methods firsthand. This is... Breshka searched for words. This is not how the Concordat operates. We divide territory. We don't collaborate on colonization. Maybe you should start, Captain Vex said, entering the chamber with Dr. Kamathi. They'd become frequent visitors, though they no longer participated in every session. Chinwei had proven herself more than capable of representing human interests. The captain raises a point, Velrus said slowly. We've maintained our current borders for 6 centuries. Not because there was nowhere else to expand, but because we'd exhausted the easy options. Everything remaining required either cooperation or capabilities we hadn't developed. Now we have access to those capabilities, Marek said, his form pulsing with rapid calculation. And if we're sharing resources anyway through the technology exchange. It's a fundamental shift in how the Concordat operates, Matriarch Selenia said. From isolated empires to, what? A collective. A confederation, Dr. Kimathi suggested. Maintain your individual sovereignty, your unique cultures and governance structures, but work together on projects too large or complex for any single empire to tackle alone. The name, Concordat, already implies agreement and cooperation, Ambassador Lyrics noted. We've just been interpreting it narrowly, as agreement not to fight rather than agreement to build together. The chamber fell into thoughtful silence. Finally, Chancellor Torvin spoke. I need to consult with the Federation's Council of Chiefs. This is beyond my individual authority to approve. As do I, Councillor Duronen admitted. One by one, the council members acknowledged that this proposal required them to return to their respective empires for consultation. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks, Velrus decided. That should give everyone sufficient time to present this proposal to their leadership and return with responses. As the council began to disperse, Velrus gestured for Captain Vex to approach. You knew this would happen, he said quietly. You knew that succeeding in the Vardax expanse would lead to exactly this kind of proposal. We suspected, Vex admitted. But we couldn't propose joint ventures before proving ourselves. You needed to see what we could accomplish independently before you trust us as partners. Manipulation? Strategy, Vex corrected. Humans are good at reading social dynamics. We knew the Concordat needed proof before it would embrace change. Velrus found himself almost smiling. You're playing a dangerous game, Captain. If this goes wrong, if our empires reject the proposal or if your joint ventures fail, you'll have squandered the goodwill you've built. Then we'll have to make sure they succeed, Vex said simply. Over the next 2 weeks, something unprecedented happened across the 7 empires. Public debates erupted about the nature of the Concordat, the purpose of empire, and the value of cooperation versus competition. Ancient civilizations that had settled into comfortable certainty found themselves questioning assumptions held for millennia. The Craxian Dominion's Council of Elders spent 3 days in closed session before Velrus could even present the proposal. When he finally did, the debate lasted another 4 days. This is madness, one elder proclaimed. We've maintained our sovereignty for 11,000 years. Now we're supposed to blur those boundaries for the sake of cooperative colony ventures. We've maintained our sovereignty by adapting, another elder countered. When the Great Plague threatened our species, we accepted help from the Vosh Collective's biologists. Was that blurred sovereignty or intelligent pragmatism? The debate raged, but ultimately the vote was decisive. 63% in favor of exploring joint venture proposals. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Garish Federation's chiefs debated for days. The Vosh Collective's matriarchs conducted complex statistical analyses of potential outcomes. The Tetrawen hegemony's military leaders argued about strategic implications. But in every empire the result was the same, cautious approval to proceed. When the council reconvened, there was a different energy in the chamber. 7 ancient empires had independently decided to try something new. The joint venture proposal is approved in principle, Velrus announced. We'll begin with pilot programs, 1 project per empire. Success will determine whether we expand the initiative. Ambassador Chen Wei stood from her platform, but before she could speak, Velrus continued. However, there's another matter to address. Ambassador Chen, you've served this council for 6 months with distinction. You've demonstrated understanding of Concordat law, respect for our procedures, and admirable diplomatic skill. Chen looked uncertain about where this was going. The probationary period for humanity was set at 20 years, Velrus said. But we included a provision for review at the 10-year mark, with the possibility of early graduation. Given the circumstances, the Council has decided to invoke a lesser-known provision, the Accelerated Integration Protocol. Matriarch Selenia took over. The protocol allows for provisional members to achieve full status in as little as 3 years if they demonstrate exceptional compatibility and contribution to the Concordat's mission. We're not granting you full membership today, Breshka clarified. But we're formally recognizing that humanity is on the accelerated track. Your review will occur in 3 years rather than 10. Qin looked genuinely shocked. We're honored. Truly. Don't be, Chancellor Torvin said gruffly. It means higher expectations. You'll be scrutinized more carefully, your projects evaluated more critically, your mistakes examined more thoroughly. We'll accept those terms, Qin said after a moment's recovery. There's one more change, Ambassador Lyric said gently. She gestured to the chamber's center. A new seat rose from the floor, smaller than the 7 primary seats but unmistakably permanent. Your observation platform was always intended as temporary, Lyrics explained. This is your formal council seat. You still don't have full voting rights, but you're no longer a peripheral observer. You're a participating member of this council. As Qin walked to her new seat, a position that put her nearly level with the other council members, Velrus reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. The Celestial Concordat Chamber had been built for empires. Ancient, powerful, certain of their place in the universe. Then humanity had entered, bringing chaos and possibility in equal measure. The chamber was adapting. And perhaps, Velrus thought as he watched Qin Wei take her place among beings whose civilizations predated her entire species, perhaps that was the point all along. The chamber wasn't meant to preserve the past. It was meant to forge the future. And for the first time in millennia, that future looked genuinely uncertain, which was terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely necessary. To new partnerships, Velrus said, raising his drinking vessel in a gesture he'd learned from human diplomatic custom. To new partnerships, the council echoed, even Breshka and Diaranen managing the words without too much reluctance. And in the void between star systems, in a chamber built to contain the ambitions of giants, 7 ancient empires and 1 upstart civilization began writing the next chapter of galactic history. Together.